On April 15, 2012, a game was released by an underground development team that shook the horror scene as a whole. This game would encourage other games to be exactly like it, and showcases that if you have the proper skills to understand horror, you can completely wipe out all competition from under you. A relatively simple game with such fantastic execution was brought to life on this very day 10 years ago. And today, my friends, I am talking about SCP Containment Breach. You wake up, totally confused in a prison cell. No intro or expedition dump needed. Imagine if a containment breach had that. No, this is a serious situation, and you, as the player, try to piece together why you are locked up in this cell. The game directs you to the only thing you have in your cell, a piece of paper. Picking up and reading said piece of paper introduces you to where you are in one of the SCP Foundation sites. You are now labeled as D9341. No surname or nickname to go around. You probably don't even remember your real name. You don't remember anything. The Foundation on the paper confirms your presence as a prisoner used for future testing. They are brutally honest with you on why you are here, but deep down you know these so-called tests won't be as simple as they say it is. They also guarantee your freedom at the end of the month if you give them your full cooperation. Little do the prisoners know, after a month they are killed and discarded whilst being replaced with new test subjects. 2 guards open up your cell and demand you follow them, instigating death if you do not comply with them. You walk with them in the steel hallways into a room where he tells you the others are waiting for you, whilst handing you the same kind of piece of paper you were told to pick up in your cell. You read it and it tells you about SCP-173, a tall concrete monster. You then open the only accessible door to the chamber, where SCP-173 stands there in the corner, with you being behind 2 other D-Class.
With SCP-173...
Then, out of absolutely nowhere, the gate malfunctions and you must run out before you suffer the same fate as the other D-Class. 173 breaks out and kills the guard, and then, you are alone and it is now up to you. I fucking love this intro. It, in the 5 minutes of showing you the game, explains how dark and gritty the game will be. It showcases how terrifying the hallways are, how extreme the site is, how deceptive the Foundation is, and how dangerous the SCPs truly are. They do it in a manner so extremely well that you feel personally in danger whilst being in this containment breach situation. I might be overanalyzing the hell out of the intro, but you know what? I don't even care. This intro is absolutely amazing and I love it to bits. Anyways, you have a simple objective as D9341. Get out of the facility as fast as you can, whilst avoiding SCPs and MTF. The SCP that you will 100% see the most is SCP-173, who follows you the entire time in every single zone besides surface. On Keter, he is relentless. It is basically being unfair where he spawns, and it is close to impossible to beat. So you have to keep track of your sprint and blink meter. This game has a unique addition to it called procedural generation, that every time you load into a different save or create a different game, the map will be totally different. To my knowledge, there are over hundreds of seeds in the game that all strive to give you a different experience every time you load a new save. But due to this random generation, it can lead to some seeds being straight up broken and unplayable, so you better hope that you don't get a seed that is broken. There are a lot of SCPs in this game, obviously, so much so that I can't list every single one of them. I will only list the ones that are commonly seen in the game, and this includes SCP-173, SCP-106, SCP-049, SCP-096, SCP-1499, SCP-966, and SCP-914. Some of these SCPs are there to help you, like for example SCP-1499, where it is super helpful to escape 106 chases, and overall bad spawns with 049 or 173 by putting on the hat and teleporting yourself to a different dimension. SCP-914 is especially helpful with upgrading your gear and items. Then the rest of them try to kill you. I would have put SCP-939 on this list, but some saves don't even require you to go down there and go see him. There are 3 main difficulties to SCP Containment Breach, and these include Safe, where it is a pretty chill and laid-back experience and you can save with the click of a button. Euclid, where it is a little bit harder with SCPs being more frequent with chases and you can only save at monitors. And Keter. You know, Keter should be an SCP in itself, to be honest. In the Ultimate Edition of SCP Containment Breach, there is another difficulty called Thaumiel, where I believe it is harder than Keter in a bunch of ways, but I've never tested it myself to see, so I'm not very sure about that one. Now, this game relies heavily on atmosphere to scare the player, so much so that most of the soundtrack for the game was made for atmospheric audio design. You could probably hear most of these audio tracks and they would seem familiar to you. That is because these are in a lot of horror games and horror videos for ambience. Listen for yourself. Okay, now back to what I was saying. This game barely has any jump scares. No Five Nights at Freddy's jump scare needed, as the ambience and overall atmosphere is scarier than most of the SCPs themselves. You traverse through long, dark steel hallways with the thought of an SCP being right there behind that door. It is the element of surprise that shocks the player, and the creator of the game, Regalis, is not unfamiliar with scary atmospheres. He made SCP-087-B just a few years prior to the game, and set the foundations for Containment Breach. Speaking of the creator, let's speak about the development portion of SCP Containment Breach. Development for Containment Breach began when Regalis was in high school. He made SCP-087-B a few months before and wanted to take his skills up a notch. He began to implement the same kinds of ideas he had for SCP-087-B, which was to make the game more horrifying with atmosphere rather than jump scares. Regalis began to work on the game well after high school and into university, stating that it was a pipe dream to become a full-time game developer. On April 15, 2012, the first build of the game was released to the public, and this first build was generally buggy and incomplete. But over time, with help from the community, he was able to grab a few modders who made mods for the game to help him update the game into a more stable position. Content creators like Markiplier and Yamimash helping to boost the game's popularity over the internet. In 2018, a company going by the name of Third Subdivision Studios assisted Regalis into making a more stable version of the game. This would help Regalis and his modding team to make the most stable build, V1.3.11. Without this studio and the help of the community, this game would not have had the same impact as it does today. The plot of SCP Containment Breach relies heavily on community theories, and Regalis himself has stated that the community is extremely close to figuring out all of the puzzles in the game. It's kind of like Scott Cawthon in a sense. The player takes the role as D9341, a prisoner/test subject for the Foundation that is on death row for unknown crimes that you yourself don't know. After the events of SCP-173 escaping, you are free to roam around. You are able to come across a strange hole in the wall called SCP-1162, with it giving you random items that you are able to steal from the wall. After taking items from the wall, you obtain an ID card, with D9341 saying to himself, "This guy looks exactly like me." People have theorized and put together that D9341 is named Benjamin Oliver Walker, a senior researcher who was sent to be a D-class after being detained by the Foundation for the studying of spiral gestalt. It is not entirely known what this is, but people think that this is the reason D9341 is able to understand and predict what will happen in the Containment Breach. It is the reason he can save and respawn after he dies, but no one is entirely too sure. The situation is so dire that the situation is only to be seen by the O5s, the highest ranking officers in the Foundation. Alright, now that our character is kind of solved, how do we get out of here? From escaping countless instances of SCP-173, SCP-049, and SCP-106, you can eventually make it to one of the 2 gates, Gate A and Gate B. It is essentially up to luck which one you make it to first, but doing a specific amount of interactions can lead to one of 4 different endings. The first ending is Gate B ending, where you turn off SCP-079's door control and go to speak to him to turn it back on, and turning it back on inclines 079 to open Gate B for you. If you make it to Gate B, you can actually make it up to surface. You make it to the escape where a locked door with a keypad is seen. Then, after the MTF can't contain 682, they order for the nuclear warhead to be activated. After around 30 to 60 seconds, the nuke goes off, where the site is destroyed and D9341 is presumed to have died. The second Gate B ending is mainly all of the same, but instead of keeping the nuke on, you run down to nuke room and turn off the nuclear warhead. Then repeating the same steps, you reach the escape and wait for the nuke to be activated. Then, the MTF are unable to activate it, and then...
Capturing SCP-682 is now our #1 priority.
D9341 is shot by MTF behind him, assuming to be another D-Class who somehow managed to get out. They told D9341 to go to Gate A, but instead of doing so, he went to Gate B. The third ending is the Gate A ending, where you do all of the same, but instead of listening to 079 and going to Gate B, Gate A is now opened and you are free to leave. SCP-106 teleports himself to surface with you and charges himself at MTF. There, you are prompted to go to the escape tunnels, and then you are met by the Chaos Insurgency, and it proceeds to you being kidnapped by the Chaos. The fourth and final ending is the second Gate A ending, where instead of keeping 106 uncontained, you go to his containment chamber and contain him. You turn on the femur breaker and deactivate the electric field and turn on the sound, whereas a D-Class screams while it's being used as a distraction. Just listen to how horrifying his screams are after turning on the femur breaker. After containing SCP-106, you go to Gate A after doing everything like as before, but instead of being taken by Chaos, the MTF detain you and keep you alive for questioning. D9341's status is unknown after this ending. Just like the incredible story of Secret Lab, all it took was one kid in high school to make a mod about a universe where monstrous stories can be created. Regalis took his ideas to the maximum effort and decided to create his own atmospheric horror game. Containment Breach was a game pushed by community aid, and it well and truly paid off. This game spawned a plethora of games like it, and I believe we wouldn't have games like SCP Pandemic or SCP Secret Laboratory without SCP Containment Breach. Ladies and gentlemen, 10 years of SCP Containment Breach has been celebrated, a whole decade later of playing this SCP game. In short, SCP Containment Breach is one of the video games of all time.